going to kick it off here. We'll have a few more coming on, but I'm very excited to kick off quarter 2 with all of you today. Today's very exciting. It's the first masterclass in our quarter 2 theme, which is profit science. And so this quarter we're reading Simple Numbers and Simple Numbers 2.0. Hopefully you've got your books. If not, it's okay. You got plenty of time. We'll be looking at these books all quarter. Yeah, we're building on what we learned in Q1. So Q1 was profit first, and the theme there was profit systems. So how do we create a cash flow system that's going to really help you generate profit consistently in your practice? And now we're going to go deeper. So quarter 2, we're diving deeper into the theme of cash flow and profitability with simple numbers and simple numbers 2.0 with the math of it all. So if you're not a math whiz, don't worry. We'll break it down. We'll make it very simple. We've got Charles CPA on the call too to lend his expertise. And Charles is a great new partner of ours, helping our clients with their tax returns. So if you had a hairy time getting through tax season or still getting through tax season, Charles would love to help you. Okay. So let's first of all, this is not a webinar. This is interactive. It'll so feel free to ask questions, unmute yourself, shout out, contribute if you have ideas, things you want to share. We're all for it. I used to teach eighth grade science and it was never quiet, so quiet is a little disturbing. Um, Before we jump in, let's do our intros. We'll go around the room here. Introduce yourself, your business or law firm, and where you are located, in your practice area too, if you don't mind. So let's start with Jeanette. Go ahead, Jeanette.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Maxey. Um, I'm located in the greater Cincinnati, Ohio area, and my two focus areas are estate planning and real estate.
All righty. Thanks, Jeanette. Let's go to Heidi next.
Hello, everyone. My name's Heidi Keenan. My office is in Frankfort, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, and I practice estate planning, probate, and veterans disability law.
Awesome. Very good. Let's do Charles next. Go ahead, Charles.
Yep, my name is Charles Harris. I run a small CPA firm. We do tax planning, tax prep, and bookkeeping. And we work pretty closely with Darren and his team, and John specifically, who's also on the call, to just kind of make sure that your numbers are correct and can actually help, right?
Fantastic. All right, and let's go to Evans next. Evans looks like you got a new haircut. I love it. Looking good. Looking fresh.
Hi, how are you? This is Evans Libro. I'm in New York City. I started my firm many years ago, and I practice primarily real estate, and we do some immigration as well. And good to see everyone.
All right, good to see you.
I'm meeting a deadline right now, so I'm sort of like I'll be off screen for a minute.
That works. Perfect. Okay, let's go to Abis next. Welcome, Abis.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Darren. Thank you for the welcome. My name is Ebise. I have a criminal defense firm in small solo in Washington, D.C., focusing on criminal law in federal court.
Awesome. Ebise, thank you so much for helping me pronounce your name. Beautiful name.
Thank you, Darren.
And we're so glad you're here as a new member.
Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, and John, let's do you next.
Okay, I work with Darren and I work with Charles. I'm a law firm advisor, been doing this for years. Also advise businesses throughout a variety of industries, primarily retail, but also tech. And I'm here to learn and support.
Awesome. All right. And of course, you know me, Darren Wurz, your faithful guide here. So great. And you know, if you're not familiar with us, at the Lawyer Millionaire, we help law firm owners with their businesses and their personal finances as well. Let's do this also. Go ahead and put your information in the Zoom chat if you would like to connect with each other. if you want to do a little networking, you could put your LinkedIn link or URL in the chat too if you want to connect with folks on LinkedIn. Okay. Let's ask a question before we go any further. When you hear, and we don't all have to share, but if anyone wants to share, they can. When you hear the word pre-tax profit, what comes to mind? Panic, fuzziness, uncertainty? Any thoughts? Well,
I
hopefully it's not.
confess I don't even know what it means.
That's okay. That's why you're here today. Thank you, Heidi, for being brave to offer that. Um, that's okay. Today we're going to talk about what that means and how we track that number. It's a very important number. All right, so why this matters and what you'll walk away with today. We're going to walk through the four keys in Greg Crabtree's book and the first half of it. Um, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding of each of these. So the first one is market-based salary, what you'd have to pay someone if you got hit by a bus tomorrow. Your pre-tax profit benchmarks, the only profit measure that really matters, and 10% is the new break even. Your firm's salary cap, which is the NFL rule for payroll, whether you've written it down or not, and core capital and the four forces of cash flow. And let me make sure I put the workbook in the chat for you too, so you can utilize that if you'd like. I'll just grab that here. And there we go. Send that out to everyone. You can do that now or you can do it later. We will put the replay out for everybody so you can rewatch later. Okay, so those four numbers and getting those four solidified is going to really help you set the foundation for having a profitable firm and a growing firm as well. Okay, so straight from the book, simple numbers. This is what we're talking about today. So chapters 1 through 4 really align with our four keys today that we're talking about. So that's what we'll be going through. Okay, and let's start with the accounting lie. It's kind of fun because, Profit First had an accounting lie, which was that, if you remember from Profit First, revenue minus expenses equals profit. And the whole idea of Profit First is we want to think about profit earlier in the equation. So his idea was let's do revenue minus profit equals expenses, right? And so Greg Crabtree has his own version of the lie, of the accounting lie. And his is this, and it really is separating out your market salary. We're all familiar with revenue minus expenses equals profit. But in chapter 1, Greg Crabtree talks about the importance of paying yourself as the owner and what you should be making. In his words, you get paid a salary for what you do, and you get a return on what you own. And as a lawyer and a law firm owner, you're both. You are an employee of the firm, and you're also the owner of the firm. So there's two hats you wear and two things you have to think about. Your salary is labor cost. Your return as the owner is profit. A lot of times as business owners, we kind of blend those together into one lump sum, or we're just paying ourselves what's left over. Anybody ever done that? No, I'm sure we haven't. I've done that. But it's really important to understand what your wage should be as a business owner, as an employee of the firm, right? And then knowing that is really important for really understanding if you're truly profitable. So his reframe is revenue minus expenses minus market salary equals profit. And we just want to make sure that that's included in there. And we're really capturing that. Okay, so here's what that looks like in the law firm owner world. So three examples to kind of think about how this might apply. Let's say, for example, one, we have a solo attorney who took home 150,000 in distributions, but didn't pay him or herself any kind of true salary or payroll on a regular basis. And so we're thinking, oh, I made $150,000. Great. Well, yes and no. That 150 was more likely your true salary, right? And your labor costs. You earned a decent salary, but there wasn't really any true profit left over, right? So a lot of times as business owners, we're just paying ourselves what's left over. Well, we want to actually quantify what our salary should be, and anything above and beyond that, then that's profitability. Another example, example two, we have a three partner firm that splits everything equally. And John will tell you, we've run into this with some clients that we've worked with. You know, having a partnership can always be tricky. How do we split things? Who gets paid what? And in the book, he argues, you know, it doesn't really make sense in let's say a two or three partner law firm where each, we own it equally in equal shares. It may not make sense for everybody to get paid the same thing because everyone may not make the same contribution to the firm. He says, rarely are two people worth the same amount of money, even rarer for three. If two of you are rainmakers and one of you isn't, we need to make adjustments for that, right? We need to adjust for who's in what role. And so that's an important consideration. And that would show up in salary. So we're going to pay each person a salary based on their role. And then example three, and this catches a lot of people by surprise. You know, oh, I run into this one. What about you, Charles? A lot of people who try to get their taxes down to zero, right? I paid almost no taxes last year. What's wrong with that? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned it there, right? Either you didn't earn any income or you're cheating. I think sometimes people look at this year's taxes and think, I want to pay $0 in taxes this year, but really that's just pushing off taxes. You're going to pay taxes, and Darren's team can really help solidify when you should take those taxes because no matter what, you're going to get taxed on the money. So it's just a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, we can always get your tax rate down to zero just by spending more money in your business. But then you don't have any money left over. One of my favorite examples is, it's a popular thing among business owners to buy a Mercedes G-Wagon. It's a very expensive, over 6,000 pound vehicle. So you get the bonus depreciation, you get a, big tax write-off. But you've just spent $150,000 and you don't have that anymore. So, we don't want to spend a lot of money just to get a little bit of tax savings. At the end of the day, our true goal is after tax profits. Okay. Key distinction. You get paid a salary for what you do, and you get a return on what you own. We mentioned that, right? So that's what we want to think about. Okay, our four numbers. Let's talk about the market-based owner salary. What would you pay someone if you had to replace yourself completely? And it's probably a lot more than you think. Let's say you got hit by a bus. That's the bus test. Um, what would you have to pay your replacement? So there's some research that you may want to do to figure out what's reasonable compensation. And if you're an S corp running the S corp strategy, this is important. Of course, if Charles, do you want to break down the S corporation strategy real quick for
Yeah.
anyone who does not familiar?
Yeah. So an S Corp is interesting because what you can do is pay yourself a reasonable salary similar to this, and then you take distributions on what's left over. And this helps you avoid payroll taxes, and can be a really great strategy for a lot of law firms because you guys are service-based businesses. There are a lot of issues if you have a ton of assets, which is why some companies aren't S corps. But what I do want to say too, I do a lot of reasonable compensation studies for people, and what we tell the government is going to be different than what it truly would be, right? Because for a reasonable comp study for the government, we're going to take in, hey, you're doing this much admin, you're doing this much marketing and sales, you're doing this much lawyering. But if you were to actually replace yourself, my guess is you'd probably have to hire three people to do those things.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that this is really, really helpful to think about too, because even if you're an S corp, your S corp salary might be 150, but really to replace you, it's going to be more like 250 to 300, right? And so I think that's important to realize.
Yeah. And, for tax purposes, we're going to want that S corp wage to be somewhat low,
Right.
defensibly low, right? So we want some
Defensively.
studies to back that up. So you can benchmark your salary, you can do some research, you can figure out and you, as Charles said, you may be wearing several hats. So you might have a blended rate, right, based on how you're spending your time. If 10% of your time is spent on admin, then 10% of your salary, if you're wanting to really benchmark it, might align with an admin's pay rate. Or if 50% of your time is spent rainmaking, right, then you might align 50% of your salary with, that type of a role. There is a spot in the worksheet for you to think through the different roles that you engage in running your business, and you can do some research on what an average annual, salary, a reasonable annual salary would be for each of those, and then apply a ratio or a percentage to each of those to figure out what should be your true market-based wage. Now, what we're talking about here, well, saving on taxes is great too, but what we're really talking about here is just making sure that you get paid what's reasonable, right? And, you know, some law firms even do have, maybe they're running payroll for themselves, but maybe they also do have like a regular draw that they take, and setting that up on a consistent regular basis. We've talked about this before. One of the most powerful things you can do for yourself as a business owner, as a law firm owner, is to pay yourself on a regular basis. That's why I like setting up payroll for an owner, because it forces you to pay yourself on a regular basis. Um, and it's all part of truly separating your personal and business finances from each other. When you do that, you get a lot of clarity around the business and also around your own personal finances. You may not think that that makes a big, huge difference, and John will tell you we get a lot of pushback sometimes from owners who want to keep putting things on the business card for points, and things like that. But it just muddies the waters and it creates a lot of confusion. And we have seen it where, when you actually take that step of separating things out, truly making that division, things change. And all of a sudden, the business starts taking off. You start saving money, you start paying down debt because you all of a sudden have that clarity. Okay. So that's how you can kind of go about determining what your wage should be, looking at the different hats you wear, looking at the pay that would be reasonable for each of those roles, and create kind of a blended rate there. Now, yeah, as Charles said, the true replacement for you would probably be very expensive because as the owner of the business, you probably work harder than anybody else, and you're probably working two or three jobs at once. And I want to give Veronica a chance to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Veronica Montemayor. I am in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, and I practice immigration and personal injury.
Great. All right. Thanks for hopping on, Veronica. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Okay. And so that was part one, the market-based salary. Number two is your pre-tax profit. Pre-tax profit is probably the best way to really measure. Let's see, am I on the right? Let me just check my slides real quick. Okay. Yep. There we go. Pre-tax profit. What is pre-tax profit? Well, it is your net income before you've paid taxes. Um, the real argument that Greg makes, many business owners might be familiar with the concept of EBITDA. So a lot of businesses will calculate their profit as EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before taxes, interest, depreciation, and amortization. Well, Greg argues that interest and depreciation are real costs. And so the best way to really measure your profit is keeping those in there as true expenses. And so you can really have a better understanding because, what depreciation means is, let's say you buy an asset for your business. Let's say it's a car, right? You on your taxes, you're going to, well, bonus depreciation kind of mess this up, but you're going to write that off over a period of time, right? So you're not going to have let's say you buy a $40,000 car, you're not going to get that full deduction in year one under the old rules. You're going to get a piece of that deduction each year over its useful life. That makes sense because that way you're spreading out the cost of it, spreading out the expense of it, because then, in 5 or 7 years or whatever the useful life is, you're going to have to buy a new one, right? And so for any kind of equipment, you would be writing that off over time. But the real thing we want to focus on here, so we want those costs and interest too. Interest is a real cost if you have interest costs. But taxes can come out later. But the real thing, the real point we want to get to here is that 10% really should be the new break even. Okay. This is the mistake that we make as business owners. We say, oh, I have X amount of revenue, so I have X amount to spend, right? My firm is making 500,000, so I have 500,000 to spend. Wrong. We need to build in a buffer. There needs to be some space in there. And so here are the benchmarks that Greg provides for business owners. If you're less than 5%, your business is really on life support. What that means is you don't have the space for disruptions in the business. You're not going to survive if you lose a big client or you all of a sudden have a bar complaint or something happens that really comes along and disrupts your business. So often we're kind of zero-sum thinking, right? And that's a big mistake. We need to actually budget profit in there, right? And so if you're using profit first, this is a great way to kind of force yourself into this habit. And you should really, if you're using the profit first system, be trying to get your profit percentage that's going into your profit account up to 10% at least. If you're at 10%, you've got a good business. This means that you have sufficient buffer to weather the storms. You have enough room that if there's a major disruption, you're probably going to be okay. You're going to have some cushion in there. That's a good business. That's what we should be aiming for. And that really is the minimum acceptable threshold that we should be aiming for. When you're doing your budgeting, when you're looking at your percentages, and one of the things that we do in our business, and this is a good practice, I think, for lots of businesses, is to look at what percentage of revenue is going to different categories. Okay. So what percent of revenue is going to salaries? What percent of revenue is going to marketing? What percent of revenue is going to software or overhead? And when you're doing your percentages, don't forget that you want a certain percentage to go to profit. You want some money left over. And so really we shouldn't be operating our business on 100% of our revenue. We should be operating our business on 90% or less of our revenue. So that's the goal. And we want to plan that way. We want to be proactive about getting there instead of, getting to the end of the quarter and, well, what's left over? Did I make a profit? If so, great. If not, oh crap. Okay. Now, 15% is really the gold standard. 15% or more means you've got a great business. And at this level, you have room to grow and room to reward. You have room to potentially hire at this level. So we really shouldn't be thinking about hiring unless we can get to that 15% mark. And once you're at that 15% mark, okay, now we have permission to invest back in the business, to hire. And that's going to bring you back down because when you do that, especially for law firms, when you hire an attorney, yes, they're going to bring in their own, hopefully they're going to be a profit center for you. You hire an associate, they're going to generate more income for you. But you've still got to bring in the business as the business owner, and you've still got to pay for the overhead, and you've still got to get them ramped up, right? There's going to be a ramp up period. So we want to get to at least around 15% or more, and then we can think about hiring. It's going to drift us back down to the 10% range. And then we can focus on getting back up to that 15% line or higher. I want to pause here and see if John or Charles has anything they want to add in there. Any stories or examples or thoughts?
I mean, I think that all the problems you talked about are pretty common, and most of the law firm owners online will recognize all of them. And there's sort of this, I think it's the ebb and the flow, not even by practice area law firm, because obviously PI has more of an ebb and a flow of cash flow. Um, but just as business can go up, or you have bad quarter, or personal life interferes and you have bad quarter, sometimes it's hard to have that courage and discipline to keep doing the little things that are going to guarantee some profit for you. But the biggest thing, and I talk about this all the time with our clients, and so for those of you who are clients, you've heard me say this, but I say it to everybody, and that is you're not operating a charity. And so when you undervalue either your hourly rate or how much you earn at the law firm because you're trying to keep it afloat, I totally get it. Those of us who've owned businesses have been there more than one time. But it has to be top of mind that you do not operate a charity, because the worst part about operating a charity, if you've ever worked for a charity, you will know this, is that the staff is usually undercompensated compared to all the vendors, to recipients. So thinking this is just such an important point to think about. If you're 10% profit, you're actually where your business needs to be to grow. If you're right at zero, if you're taking out what is not market rate, then you're working for cheap. And I think everybody on this call doesn't want to feel that way, but also recognizing that sometimes that's the reality of it, is that you're not paying yourself as much as you want because you have to keep the wheels on and the lights on and all that. So again, this is very, very common, particularly when you're starting out. If you don't have a lot of experience and you're hanging your shingle up and you know it's going to be tight for a while, and how am I going to get out of it? And this can be like a big guilt trip. But at the end of the day, it's sort of a mindset thing and a muscle issue, where profit first is a really good concept to lead off with, because you're reminding yourself every month that some little portion, maybe $1 a month, maybe 100, maybe 1,000, whatever the number is, and putting that away as fruits of your labor is a really, really, really strong mindset muscle to develop. So again, just when we talk to clients, some are more successful than others, some are really struggling, and seeing this can really be difficult. It's hard to look at and choke down if you know that you left big law and were making whatever you were, and you started your own firm, and the last 5 years have been a struggle, or maybe the political winds have made your employment law difficult, your immigration law difficult, whatever your area of practice is. Um, we've all been there. And just reorientating yourself to where you need to be is important, because at the end of the day, if everybody's getting paid and you're not, it's a very, very difficult,
Yeah.
mindset to get out of. It's really tough.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick on the market-based wage. What if I'm not able to pay myself the market-based wage that I should be paying myself just yet? Because here's how this stacks. You want to pay yourself a market wage and then have a 10% profit, right? So what if you can't yet? What if you're not there yet? Well, that's okay, because what you're doing is you're putting in sweat equity, and sweat equity is the difference between what you're actually should be paid and what you are being paid. But you don't want to do that forever because it's not sustainable. So it's okay to be there, but we need to have a pathway to figure out how we can get there. And unfortunately, I see a lot of law firm owners who have been stuck kind of a long time and in that position of not paying themselves what they need to pay themselves just yet. So it's okay to be there, but we need to have a pathway of how we can get out of there and how we're going to not be overpaying on certain things and bringing in the business we need to bring in to pay ourselves. Charles, did you want to add something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think these are ideals and I think they're right. I would be more aggressive if you're a solo operator, right? And kind of the downside, but the beauty as you get bigger, right? If you're the size of Apple, if you have a 1% profit margin, which they don't, they have much higher than that, but theoretically, right, you'd still be earning a lot of money. So if you're a solo lawyer, I actually want this to be more like 50%, if not higher
Yeah, yeah, I would
percentage.
agree.
And then every employee is going to shrink that pie, but I think 15% is really the goal if we can. Sometimes
Yes.
that's hard, and I've seen that, but I just I've seen too many small solo operators start getting a ton of marketing or bringing too many people on, and then suddenly they don't have any money, and so it's, you know,
Hmm.
be a little bit more intentional, slower maybe, but more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Charles. If you're smaller in size, you may want your profit to be much higher because you do need, as a percentage, you need a larger amount. Um, and you're so right because, when let's say it's just you and an associate, right? And when you go to hire, if you're going to hire somebody, just one person, that's going to be a huge addition to your budget as a percentage. So you're going to need a much larger profit margin to be comfortable making that transition. Absolutely. Okay, and I think we had Allie join the call. Allie, you want to do a quick intro of yourself to the group?
Sure. I'm Ali Petrova. I'm based in North Carolina, and my focus is on tax and business, M&A law.
Great. Awesome. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming on, Allie.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so quick example here of why this. Well, let's skip this and move on. Okay, let's go to salary cap, which is number three. So this is kind of interesting. So what's kind of going on this theme of hiring? Salary cap is an interesting way to kind of start to think about this as you grow, because there's a lot of confusion around hiring. So number three is the salary cap. Greg's opening argument here is the NFL analogy. Every team in the NFL operates under a salary cap. Doesn't matter how much money the owner has, the cap is the cap. And the best teams aren't necessarily the ones who outspend. They can't be because they all have the same amount of money to spend. So the best teams are the ones who are able to get the most productivity per dollar of salary. So the big concept here is salary cap and labor productivity. The formula for salary cap, we could think about it this way: revenue minus your target pre-tax profit. We want to make sure we've got that in there, minus your non-salary costs, everything else. There's your salary cap. Let's look at some examples. Okay. So if you have a law firm doing 1.5 million, you have a 15% pre-tax profit and $400,000 in non-salary costs. Your salary cap might be 875,000. Okay, potentially. Now, one of the ratios, I want to get Charles and John's kind of take on this. Um, Greg sets a standard for a labor productivity ratio of 2.0, which would be 50%. So his kind of standard for this, for how much you spend on labor, is 50%, meaning half of your revenue is total labor costs, and that would include wages, benefits, and everything else. So you could potentially use that. You could say, okay, my revenue is 1.5. This example, we would be above that labor productivity ratio, which would mean we're potentially spending too much on salary here. What do you guys think, John, Charles? What do you think about that 50% mark as a standard for your salary cap?
I mean, I think this is sort of like the are you working as a charity question, because we all feel undervalued in some ways. So if we attached an arbitrary 50%, for me, it's just more of a framing device. It's a stake in the ground. So if you're currently not at 50%, it's probably a good goal Doesn't matter what your area of practice is, doesn't matter how old you are, young you are. If you're not there, what number are you at? If you're at 30 or you're at 20 or whatever, you're at 60, you're at 70, go for 50. And if you're at 30, if you're 5 points away or 10 points away this year, do 1 or 2% better next year. And that's again, from a salary perspective and being paid what we're worth. If every time when we're in the business practicing law, we want to make sure we're charging market rate, right? So it's harder in a contingency model to know because you're doing all kinds of other things. But if your hourly rate is competitive with the rest of the market, that's where you want to be. Don't undervalue yourself there. But if it's way undervalued because you just started and you're just hungry and you just got to have work to do, sure, you're going to probably be lower. You may be going the low price model. But the stake in the ground is going to be if I'm not at market rate, my salary, next year I'm going to be 2% closer or 5% closer, and you're going to pass on a raise to your client, to your new clients that start up next year. Again, like a 50% goal is nice, just like a 15% business profit is nice. If you're not there, you don't have to be there tomorrow. I hope everybody's there tomorrow. I hope I'm there tomorrow. But the idea is to whittle away at it. Because when you whittle away at it, you're flexing that muscle, that mental mindset muscle, but you're also getting closer to the goal. Because for example, most of the time, if let's say you're 10% away from your goal and you're depressed about it and you're operating a charity and it's tough. Well, a lot of times pure austerity can give you 1 or 2% in ways you never thought of. If you're paying money for software that you don't use very often, if you're paying for Clio and you're using about 20% of the features, maybe you don't need to be using Clio. Maybe you do, but maybe if you use all the features, you're going to end up gaining 1% or 2% of efficiency and it'll come out in the wash. So again, the reason you want to be at 50%, that's a great goal. And if you're there, awesome. If you're not, can you do something this year just by changing your workflow or your intake or your collection, your AR to get back that 1 or 2% with really not changing a whole lot? Then you get this mental gain that's really important. So these are great numbers to work off of. If you're there, awesome. If you want to be there, great. But note that just like reading a book and there's 9,000 pieces of advice and you don't even know where to start, what this does
Yeah.
is just kind of frames things for you as a percentage.
That's a great way to think about it as kind of a target, or it doesn't mean you have to be there precisely, but it's a good zone to try to get to. As you grow your business, as you scale, especially as you scale towards and kind of beyond that $1 million mark, labor is going to be really tricky. It's going to be your biggest cost, and it's going to be something you've got to really handle very carefully. And so, one of the key ratios to look at is how much revenue, well, really how much gross profit, but how much revenue am I generating per dollar that I spend on labor? That's a really good way to look at your productivity. And as you hire, let's go back to the profit standards, right? As you grow and hire, you want to try and stay above that 10% profit at every step. A lot of times, what we see with law firms is adding staff too quickly and too early. You want to add labor at the last possible moment. You should be thinking, how can AI do things for me? How can technology do things for me? How can I outsource things? You know, don't hire until you really need to in many cases. And I know there's a tension here between like we read Buy Back Your Time last year, and he's all about hire, 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 and there's a good argument for that. But John and I see it in some of the law firms that we work with is just expanding that roster way too quickly, and then you bring on way too many folks, and then you're in a really tough spot of having to let people go and trim down the firm. So we want to be really cautious about that revenue per dollar ratio and how that's operating in your business. And the two hardest roles to outsource are going to be CEO and sales. That's probably going to continue to be you for a long time. You're going to be in those roles because no one is going to be a salesperson quite like you. No one's going to be a champion of the firm quite like you can be. And when you're thinking about adding folks or making that first hire potentially, it's okay for these ratios to be way off initially. But what we want to do is we want to have a plan for how we're going to get back towards there. Let's say we're going to be way above 50% spent on labor per dollar of revenue. Um, that's okay initially, but we want to have a pathway, an understanding, and a timeline of when we're going to get back to, and as John said, making that a target for you, grow the revenue and growing the profit so that we can get back down towards, 50% of revenue is labor cost or less. And that can be a key indicator for you too. If you're under 50% labor costs, you're in a good position to potentially hire. You're in a really good spot. If you're only spending 50% of your revenue or less, let's say you're only spending 40% on labor, you're in a good spot to potentially hire. And there's a lot of variability. I mean, there are one person firms doing $1 million in revenue. You know, it really depends. There's a lot of variability out there. So these are really general metrics. Your own situation might be a little bit different for sure. Okay, let's move on to our next number. So, and by the way, if you are if you're above that 50%, right? If you're spending too much on labor and your labor productivity isn't there, what that means is that you're not getting enough revenue per dollar spent on labor. There's a couple issues that could be at play. You could have a pricing issue. You might not be charging enough for your services. You're spending more for the service to be done than you're getting paid to do it, right? So you might have a pricing problem, or you might have a productivity issue in that you may want to look at ways to maximize efficiency in your workflows, maybe outsourcing certain things. What technology improvements could we make? How can we make things, how can we have things be getting done faster and more quickly and more efficiently? Okay. Number four is the core capital target. Core capital, as I like to call it, the business emergency fund. And so many law firms and businesses don't have one. We're operating on razor thin margins. We really need to have a cash reserve. So, core capital target. What is your core capital target? Well, in the book Simple Numbers, he lays this out as the core capital target. It is to have at least 2 months of operating expenses in cash, and at the same time, $0 drawn on your line of credit. You don't owe anything on the line of credit, and nothing on credit cards. Okay. And third, you have your taxes fully set aside for the year. So if you're running profit first, you have your profit account, you have your tax account set aside. So you've hopefully you've got that money, you've got the taxes done. Okay. Now we also need to get to a place where we have zero on the line of credit and zero on credit cards, or at least we're paying off the credit cards on a consistent basis. And we have 2 months of operating expenses sitting in cash. Now these are general metrics. The more volatile your business is, the more of a core capital target you might need. But you need this. And a lot of other businesses call this working capital. You need working capital. You need money. You need money that's there to take advantage of opportunities. You know, think about 2008, right? In 2008, the housing market crashed, and the stock market crashed along with it. People who made a ton of money in 2008 were people who had money laying around to snatch up those deals. Any business, you're going to want to have money that's available, A, to deal with emergencies, to deal with business disruptions, and B, to be able to take advantage of opportunities that come along. Opportunities that come along for you might be paying annually for that subscription service to get the 20% discount, right? Or different things like that. There's a lot of opportunities to save money or take advantage of, of deals and opportunities that come along if you have the cash ready. And what we don't want to do is pay for the annual subscription with the credit card where we're going to pay 29% interest, just to get the 20% discount, you end up costing yourself that 9% interest. So if you're following Profit First, we'll do a quick reminder of the Profit First system. You're already making progress towards this. You have your tax account where you're setting aside your money for taxes. You have your profit account. Now, before you use that profit account for profit distributions, you should be using it towards building your core capital. And Greg Crabtree calls the line of credit crack cocaine for business owners. We want to get that line of credit, get those credit cards down to zero. If you're carrying credit card in your business, it's a huge expense. I've been there, I've done that. And you might have a lot of money. If you're okay, I've got some background noise. If you're carrying a debt load on your credit cards, you may be spending 10, 15, $20,000 a year in interest. We want to make sure that we're not experiencing those additional costs. Okay, so how to use the money in your profit account. Profit First, we have our 5 foundational accounts set up. The first one we set up is profit, and we automatically, well, first one we set up is income, the income account, and from the income account, everything flows into 5 sub-accounts: profit, taxes, owner's comp, and operating expenses, 4 sub-accounts. Okay, so the profit account, we start with 1%. We want to grow that, get that towards 10% where we're setting aside our profit. Now, what do we use that profit for? Well, in Crabtree's system, number one, we pay our taxes. We've already set that aside. We've got the tax account. The next thing you want to do is repay debt. So every quarter, we're going to take that money that's in your profit account that you've been setting aside, and we're going to take a chunk of it out, and we're going to pay off, use it to pay down the credit cards. If those are already paid down, the second thing we're going to do is put it in a separate cash reserve account to try to reach our core capital target. Once all 3 of those areas are satisfied, number 4, we're going to go ahead and take distributions from that profit account each quarter or pay bonuses. You can use it for both. Okay? Any questions, comments, concerns so far?
Darren, I guess if you have 1, 2, 3, instead of taking a distribution, maybe you could set it aside for, I want to hire somebody. So I want to put
Yeah,
some money aside so that I can make sure I can pay them for 3 or 4 months while they're getting up and running as a generator of money.
absolutely. That's a great use. Um, if they're going to take a certain ramp up period, what is that ramp up period going to be? Let's math it out and let's set up that separate account and put the money in there. I love that. That's a fantastic idea. Any other comments, questions?
Well, I think what you said, Jeanette, was really smart too, because if we can start paying an employee before we hired them, right, we can know if we're actually going to be okay, right? And so I like to use that fourth bucket to, hey, if we're going to hire this person, can we afford them without any changes to the business? Obviously, they're hopefully going to bring in money and everything like that, and it's going to be good, but we don't want to put ourselves in a bad situation. So I really do like that idea.
Absolutely. Okay, we're coming close to the end of our time, so we're gonna skip ahead here just a little bit. We have a quick example, right? A lot of times we ask ourselves, where did the profit go? Well, you spent it. It went somewhere. A lot of times it went to a few places, like maybe you took a distribution, maybe you used it to pay taxes, maybe you paid down debt. The money went somewhere, right? And so, we want to make sure it goes to the right place. And so our our four steps here kind of give us an order of operations: taxes, debt, core capital, then we take the distributions. Okay, so in your workbook, you have some fill in the blanks. You can go through these. You can start tracking some of these metrics in your firm, seeing where you are in relationship to the different standards, and set some goals for yourself. You'll be surprised how just making profit a focus for you can change the game. So often we're just focused on getting the work done or getting new clients. But when you actually start tracking it, when you actually start looking at it on a consistent basis and forecasting it, which is what we're going to talk about next time, it really will change the game for you. Okay. If you've been up and down in your revenue, up and down in your profitability, and it's been, a bit of a struggle with the volatility and just kind of waiting to the end of the quarter to see how you did and pay yourself, this is where you can start. Okay, so number one, let's figure out where you want to get your salary to if it's not quite at market base or at a marketable range. Where do we need to get the salary to pay you what you're worth? Think about that pre-tax profit. Once we have that factored into the equation, now where are we at profit wise? How much money is left over? Is it at 5, 10, or 15%? Then we're going to know how our business is doing. If we're at 5% or less, we've got some work to do. Okay. If we're at 10%, we're doing really good. We want to keep pushing higher. If we're at 15% or higher, you're in really good territory to potentially start thinking about hiring and growing your business further. And then as you start to hire, you can pay really close attention to that labor efficiency ratio and trying to target somewhere around 50% of revenue is being spent on labor. If you're more than that, that's okay. We want to work on expanding the profitability, improving efficiency, charging more for our services, things like that, to bring in more money and spend less on labor and improve that labor efficiency ratio. And then the core capital target. Let's make sure we're building towards that. We're getting the money in the firm so that you can have a strong foundation to grow from. So often we try to grow and we haven't set the foundation yet. And then we get ourselves in trouble. And we end up with a seven-figure firm that is highly unprofitable, losing money, and has several $100,000 in credit card debt. And that is the position that we want to try to avoid getting to. And unfortunately, that is an easy situation to get into. When we're not just being very careful and very disciplined about our numbers and how we're very carefully growing. Okay, so hopefully you got some really good stuff to think about today. We've got a few minutes left for questions and comments on those four areas. Anything that surprised you, anything you disagree with, or any aha moments that might have occurred to you as we went through these? The wheels are turning. Okay, well, hopefully I did give you some good stuff to think about. Think about what was your biggest aha moment from today. Which of those four numbers made you feel a little uncomfortable? Maybe there's something there that's telling you something, right? That's okay. Being uncomfortable is okay. That means this is an area where maybe we want to work on a little bit. So what's the area you want to work on? Among these four, I want you to pick one in your mind. Which one are you going to work on over the next 90 days? Okay? And probably you want to start with the first one. If you haven't gotten that one down, we want to start there, but all of these are great to work on. So for you, in your mind, which of these you want to work on for the next 90 days? And let's really make that a focus. Okay. Make sure to join us next time, okay, for on Thursday, May 28th. We're finishing up Simple Numbers 1, and we're going to be talking about forecasting, taxes, profit strategy, and firm value. There's a whole lot in the last half of the book. But I think that one of the biggest things is I kind of tied it under the theme of knowing where you're headed. Let's know where you're headed. Let's not get to the end of the quarter to figure out what happened. Let's not get to the end of the decade to figure out what happened. Let's have a plan ahead of time to figure out where we're going with all of this. Our reading this week is Simple Numbers chapter 5 and 6. If you haven't gotten the book yet, go ahead and grab one, and you can read along with us. And we will see you then. And be sure to engage in the community. We'll have a lot of things going on in the online community at community.lawyermillionaire.com. And of course, if you need help with any of this, if you want to talk strategy, if you're kind of rough on your numbers and you want to figure out how we can improve those numbers, let's grab some time together. Let's figure it out. Let's create a plan. Let's create a hiring plan. You're thinking about hiring, thinking about your profitability. John and I would love to sit with you and strategize. So if that's you, feel free to send me an email or if you want to set up some time or just ask a quick question. You can email me at darren@lawyermillionaire.com or send me a message inside the community. All right, folks. Well, that brings us to the end today. Any last thoughts or comments anyone has before we go?
Thanks, Darren. All this has been really helpful.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Jeanette. I hope it has been. I want to give you a lot of great stuff to help you in your practice and help you grow.
Yeah, it has been. I just want to say, I think I've spoken to you about this, Darren, before. Being a solo and some months are great, other months are not as great as the one before. So sometimes it's difficult to have that even year. So you're doing great, but then you hit a slow patch in the summer. For example, real estate in the summertime, it takes things. So what I had to learn to do over the years was to know the seasons when that happens and then try to spread out the other month to try to anticipate that as best I could and not see it as a loss, but see it as an anticipation and balance everything else out.
Absolutely, 100%.
This is great.
When you have those seasons like that, you really have to be careful with it. Profit First is a great place to start with that too, and can be really helpful for that. In using the percentages, versus dollar amounts, allocating into sub accounts, and setting aside money for different purposes. So then, when that slow season comes, hey, I have money in my owner's comp account. I can pay myself for the next 3 months. Or I have money in the OpEx account. I can pay the bills, right? And things like that. Thanks for that, Evans. Really appreciate it. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, again, thank you all so much for joining. I hope you have a great chance to connect with each other as well and grow your network. We'll see you inside the community, and we'll hope to see you again on May 28th for part 2 of Simple Numbers.